bobs. I think most people seem to cover quite happily. They seem to be good answers to the questions. The only one was about spelling, and I get that there was the intention was for the unpronounceable for question. I think it was question 4 was an unpronounceable word, but obviously people pointed out that actually it kind of is pronounceable. So even if the quiz marked you wrong for that, I've marked it incorrectly. With all those questions, just be really careful with the response. So a few people, for example, didn't notice in the spelling of artillery that one of the responses had the incorrect phonetic for I. So just be careful. Those are the kind of sneaky things that might catch you out. And it is part of accuracy. You want to make sure that you're accurate in your transmissions. There's a couple of bits that we actually will get recovered in one of the lessons today, so I won't go over them too badly. But if you scored low on any of the assessments, the kind of end of lesson assessments that have been coming out, just make sure you go back over your notes. If you've got any questions, let me know. You can put comments on your return submissions and stuff, and we can discuss it. So if you do have a question on something, now's the time really to get that clarified, because 9 times out of the 10, if you try and teach it, the cadets will ask you a question that might catch you out. But also, you know, we need to make sure we teach the cadets the right things. So if you don't know them, then how can you teach them on? So just, yeah, keep an eye on that. There's a few that I've noticed that have been a little bit lower. You know, if you're kind of under 50%, then that's the kind of thing you need to just check in on that lesson, maybe rewatch it. And if you've got any questions that come off the back of it, let me know. So today we're going to go on to corrections, repetitions, and then there's one more full lesson after that, and then a couple of bits that I want to talk about. So correction repetitions, by the end of this session, we should be able to explain how to correct a mistake in a transmission and ask for a repetition of a message. Why do we do this? Well, ultimately, because you're going to make mistakes. So even though, as we covered last week, messages should be planned before you press the pressel, sometimes things will go wrong. You might just fall over your words, or you might be distracted, or, you know, there's any number of reasons why you might get something wrong. And you need to know how to correct yourself appropriately over the net so that the correct bit of information gets transmitted and received by the stations and understood, and not the mistake that you've made. So we'll look at the 2 different types of corrections. So there's immediate corrections. You realize straight away that you've made a mistake. And then there's delayed corrections where later on in time, you realize that previously you've made a mistake, or maybe you were given the wrong information and that you then get the right information and you need to correct on that. And then we'll look at repetitions. So what happens if you don't hear what someone else has said? How can you ask them for a repetition? So let's look at corrections first. So a sender might make a mistake in his transmission, which needs to be corrected. And there's 2 types of corrections, as we already talked about. There's immediate, which is during that transmission itself, and then delayed, where the mistake is identified after the transmission is complete. So if the sender wishes to correct a word or phrase that he's just spoken, then the pro word used is wrong. So it's another one of our pro words. You know, we're now building up a big list of different pro words that we can use. And for immediate corrections, or for corrections generally, the pro word that we use is wrong. And then it's followed by the last correct part of the message, and then the correction. So by saying the last correct part of the message, we can clarify to the receiver which bit's right, and it makes it really clear which bit's right and which bit's wrong. And it gives them a part to look back at because they've been writing, you should be writing down all the messages that you receive. And it gives you a chance to look back at where that incorrect transmission was. And then the message can also be corrected by the sender at the end of the message. So you could say, oh, and then go back to the bit that you got wrong. So we'll look at what that looks like. Ben, if you can be 0, and Alex, if you can be hotel 12.
Yep.
Cool.
Hello, Zero. This is Hotel 1-2. Enemy infantry, wrong. Enemy tanks advancing west. Over.
0, Roger, out.
So you can see there quite clearly that Hotel 1-2 made a mistake. Straight away, they said infantry when they meant to say tanks. So straight away after their mistake, they say wrong. Then they say enemy, which is the last correct thing. Then tanks, which was the correction, and then they carry on their transmission. Does that make sense to everyone? Corrections are one of the things that I notice people struggle with, the syntax of it. So it's the kind of thing we want to just make sure that we fully comprehend. So you can see there, it's immediate correction. They've used the pro word wrong. And then they said enemy, which was the last correct bit of their transmission. And then they've corrected by saying tanks instead of infantry. And they've done the rest. So let's look at the same thing, but doing an immediate correction at the end of the message. So same call signs. I want to give Ben a nudge. Ben?
We were just debating call signs.
Sorry.
Hello, Zero. This is Hotel 1-2. Enemy infantry advancing west. Wrong. Enemy tanks. Over.
0, Roger, out.
So you can see in this instance, he's transmitted the whole message, he said the whole message, and he's realized at the end the same mistake on the previous one. He said infantry when he meant to say tanks. So then he uses the pro word wrong. He says the correct bit just before the mistake, and then he corrects the mistake. So the enemy bit's the correct bit, and the tanks is the correction. Does that make sense to everyone? If not, I'm happy to go over it in more detail. And James, that's the worst pun I've ever seen. Cool. So that's if we realize we've made the mistake within the transmission. If we realize later on that we've made a mistake, or maybe that you were given the wrong information and then later on you've been corrected, so you want to transmit the correction, then there's a slightly different way of doing it because we need to reference back to your incorrect transmission. So if the station sends a message and later realize that they've made a mistake, a delayed correction is used. The sender contacts all of the recipients of the message and references the message either by time or other unique reference. So again, it goes back to making sure that we keep an eye on the time and we write down messages as we receive them. So we're going to write down our transmissions before we make them, and everything we hear, we want to make sure we're writing down. And that way, when a correction comes in, we can refer back to it against its time or some other kind of unique reference. And as you kind of get more advanced in it, that might be referencing a backcode key setting or something like that. So that's not something we cover within this course, but it's just something to kind of have in the back of your mind where it might get referenced. So once the message is identified, the mistake must be identified and then corrected using the pro word wrong. Remember, wrong is then followed by the last correct part of the message. And then the correction. So we do the last correct part of the message and then the correction, not just the correction. So let's look at a delayed correction. Hopefully, Ben.
Hello, Zero. This is Hotel 1-2. Reference my message of 11:45 hours. Advancing south. Wrong. Advancing north. Over.
0, Roger, out.
So you can see here, he's referenced a message by using a time. So he's referenced the message that he sent at 11:45 hours. He said the last correct bit of his transmission previously to the incorrect bit, and he said the incorrect bit. Then he's clarified it with the pro word wrong, and then advancing, so the correct bit, north, which is the correction, over. And 0 is obviously happy with that, so they've said Roger out. Does that kind of tally with everyone as well? Kind of add in. So in a delayed response, you need to reference the message, the message transmission. You need to say what you transmitted incorrectly. You need to give your pro word wrong and then correct it. So if you've got a longer message, you might want to clarify where the incorrect bit is within the message. So you've got extra pro words you can add after wrong. So you can qualify it with wrong all after, all before, word after, or word before. So this is just helping you to make sure you make it really clear which bit of your transmission was wrong. Oh yeah, and from and to. So let's look at these. Alex, you can say 0. Ben, you can go to Juliet 2-2.
Yep.
Hopefully.
Hello, Charlie 2. This is 0. Reference my message of 0910 hours. All after, approach, wrong. Approach from track. Juliet 2-2, acknowledge. Over.
Juliet 2-2, Roger out.
Okay, so there's quite a lot going on in here that we can talk about that gives a really good example of use of voice procedure. So let's look at the delayed correction bit first. So he's referenced his message, referenced my message. He's then given clarification of where it was incorrect. So all after approach, which is quite clearly, everything after approach, wrong. And then he's given the approach, because that's correct, from track. And the acknowledgement. So the other thing to realize here is he's called a Charlie 2. So he's called a collective call. So he's talking to multiple call signs, but he doesn't want a response from everyone because we want to keep our transmission short, stop enemy interception. So he's only asked for an acknowledgement from one call sign, and that one call sign has come and acknowledged. This Charlie 2 might have 20 call signs with him. We don't know. And that's part of our kind of keeping it unknown to the enemy. So does that make sense how you would use the all after? Okay, so everything from his transmission after the word approach is wrong. So that can be scrapped out. And then he gives the correction approach from track. It's quite a useful one. Another one, so Alex, you can stay at 0, Ben is Juliet 2-2.
Hello, Charlie 2, this is 0. Reference my message of 0910 hours. All before attend, wrong. All sun rays are to attend. Juliet 2-2, acknowledge, over.
Juliet 2-2, Roger out.
So this time, instead of all after, we're now looking at all before. So everything before the word attend was incorrect. You can scrap it off. And then he starts the message from the beginning all the way up to attend, which was the correct bit. So 1 second, I'll just add someone message me to ask me for the login. So all before attend, so everything before that correct bit is going to get deleted. And then the correction is obviously given in. Sorry. Another example of this would be between, well, we'll see in a second.
Hello, Charlie 2, this is 0. Reference my message of 0910 hours. Word before hours, wrong. 1100 hours. Juliet 22, acknowledge. Over.
Juliet 22, Roger, out.
So here's an example where the time's been given incorrectly. So for whatever reason, the time was wrong. So he's come back to clarify, and he's used the pro word word before. So word before hours is going to be the time. Wrong, given the correct time, and then hours again, so that we can locate that within the message. Hopefully that makes sense with word before. So you can kind of see this happening now, where there's always a correct bit that's transmitted next to the correction. The bit that was always correct is always transmitted. And one more.
Hello, Charlie 2, this is 0. Reference my message of 0910 hours from O group to approach, wrong. O group at 11:30 hours, approach. Juliet 22, acknowledge. Over.
Juliet 22, Roger, out.
So here's an example where you can identify the either end of that's correct, and everything in between it was incorrect. So he's used from one thing to the other thing is wrong, and then said those two things with the correction in the middle. Hopefully this kind of starts to make sense. It's pretty logical. The whole point is that it's logical because we want it to be really clear. And what this is avoiding is you transmitting the entire message. You're only really transmitting a small portion of it to get that correction across, but keep your transmission length as short as possible. Does anyone have any questions about corrections? It's a bit of VP that everyone uses all the time. You will make mistakes on transmissions, and it's about being able to gracefully and clearly correct those transmissions, and knowing that really well in your head so that when it happens, you don't get in a fluster, you don't end up swearing, you correct yourself. And it happens on the radio to all of us, apart from maybe Alex. Alex seems to never make a mistake. Right, so let's look at repetitions. So if a station fails to receive all or parts of a message, then a repetition can be requested from the sender. And we do that by using the pro word say again. We specifically don't use the word repeat. Repeat has other meanings on a radio, specifically towards like artillery barrages and things like that. So hence why we use the pro word say again. And you'll find that a lot of instructors, when they teach this, if students start using the word repeat, then they will be quite robust in correcting those students, because it is important to make sure you get it right. And you'll start noticing that people who do use radios and VP will quite often use say again in like everyday speech. It's a good way of telling if someone's ever used a radio before. So to avoid requests for repetitions, a potentially difficult word or phrase may be repeated using the pro word I say again. So if you think you're transmitting and you're working with a station that maybe is difficult, you've identified that it's difficult from your radio check, and there's something really important that you're transmitting, you might use I say again to make sure that they've heard it. However, you need to avoid this where possible, because if you say it twice, you're increasing your transmission length and you're increasing the chance the enemy is gonna hear that. And we're trying to minimize both things, and we're trying to minimize the amount that the enemy is going to hear. So you only really use it sparingly, but it can be a really useful feature. So let's look at this. Alex can stay as 0 and Ben as Papa 3-1.
Hello, Papa 3-1. This is 0. Enemy patrol sighted at road junction 400 meters east of your position. Over.
So Papa 3-1 wasn't really listening.
Papa 3-1, say again, over.
0. Enemy patrol sighted at road junction 400 meters east of your position, over.
Papa 3-1, Roger, out.
Of course, I joke and say he wasn't listening, but it might be that he'd been distracted by something else, or he had a problem with his radio. He was in the middle of a battery change and he just caught the tail end of the transmission or something like that. So, you know, it happens. So you can see he didn't get the message. So he's used the pro word say again, over, and that's told 0 that he needs to retransmit his message. Now the conversation's already started. So 0 doesn't need to say hello and all that stuff again. He just needs to say the message portion itself. So he starts the transmission identifying by his call sign 0 and then says the message portion again. Papa 3-1 actually gets it this time and therefore comes back with their call sign Roger, which, you know, I've received your message, out. So there's a question about the slide. On your first slide, it said the sender request say again. So this is a repetition can be requested from the sender, so not by the sender. So whoever sent the message, if you haven't got it, you can ask them to send it again. It's all right. It's not a problem. Right, so that was that one. So you can see how that works. If you just use the pro word say again, that requires a repetition of the whole transmission, the whole message. A full repetition of messages should be kept to a minimum. It's rare that you actually miss the entire message. It might just be that you've missed a little bit of it. So if only a portion of the message needs repeating, it's usually better to identify that section by name. For example, if you've missed the grid reference because they're talking quite quick and maybe you couldn't write it down fast enough or you were distracted, you can just use say again grid. And that means I haven't got the grid reference. Could you just send the grid reference again? I've got everything else. Or say again time. Or say again direction. Say again call sign. It's all those kind of things to avoid the sender having to resend the entire message. Again, we're going back to our security. We want to keep our transmissions as brief as possible because they reduce the likelihood of the enemy being able to intercept, analyze, and then deceive us. So the pro words say again can further be qualified by the pro words. And you might recognize these from a minute ago. All after, all before, word after, word before, or from and to. So in the same way, I have just to close my screen. Here we go. In the same way as corrections, we can clarify the exact bit that we need to be said again. So let's look at this. Ben can be 0 this time, and Alex can be Charlie 1-3.
Hello, Charlie 1-3 and Whiskey 2-1. This is 0. Move 1 kilometer east to support Romeo 1-1 Alpha. Charlie 1-3, acknowledge. Over.
Charlie 1-3, say again all after support. Over.
Zero, support Romeo 1-1 Alpha. Over.
Charlie 1-3, Roger, out.
So you can see how this works. He's asked for a repetition of everything after the word support. So 0 comes back with support and then everything after support. So support Romeo 1-1 Alpha, over. So you can see how that syntax is very similar in terms of corrections as well. You say the last bit that they actually heard and then the rest of the message. keep the call signs, I suppose, or before this time.
Hello, Charlie 13 and Whiskey 21. This is 0. Move 1 kilometre east to support Romeo 11 Alpha. Charlie 13, acknowledge. Over.
Charlie 13, say again, all before east. Over.
Zero, move 1 kilometre east. Over.
Charlie 13, Roger, out.
Okay, so in this instance, it's all before instead of all after. So they've said, say again, all before east, and 0 has said everything before and including the word east. So one of the questions that came up, which is what if Whiskey 21 needed say again, then yeah, Alex has kind of come back. They'd request that repetition after Charlie 13 is finished. They'd key up and request. So let's look at word after, another example.
Hello, Charlie 13 and Whiskey 21. This is 0. Move 1 kilometre east to support Romeo 11 Alpha. Charlie 13, acknowledge. Over.
Charlie 13, say again, word after 1 kilometre. Over.
Zero, 1 kilometre east. Over.
Charlie 13, Roger, out.
Cool. So there's a couple of people who don't seem to be able to see the presentation. It does exist. You might have to look on you change your layout and to find the right person, but I am presenting at the moment, so I can see me. You might just have to have a little bit of a search around. So in this instance, it's word after. So they've only missed one word. It was the word after 1 kilometre. So, you know, self-explanatory here. Say again, word after 1 kilometre. 0 replies with 1 kilometre. So the last bit they have heard, east, over. And then we'll see word before. Hopefully you can start predicting these now.
Hello, Charlie 13 and Whiskey 21. This is 0. Move 1 kilometre east to support Romeo 11 Alpha. Charlie 13, acknowledge. Over.
Charlie 13, say again, word before Romeo 11 Alpha. Over.
0, support Romeo 11 Alpha. Over.
Charlie 13, Roger, out.
So in this instance, you know, if you look at that message, it's much clearer to say again word before Romeo 11 Alpha than it would be to say again word after 2, because 2 is a bit of a meh word, really. So in this instance, you know, say again word before Romeo 11 Alpha, 0's come back with the word before, and then Romeo 11 Alpha to help place it, and it's all good. From and to, here's a good one.
Hello, Charlie 13 and Whiskey 21. This is 0. Move 1 kilometre east to support Romeo 11 Alpha. Charlie 13, acknowledge. Over.
Charlie 13, say again, from 1 kilometre to Romeo 11 Alpha. Over.
Zero, 1 kilometre east to support Romeo 11 Alpha. Over.
Charlie 1-3, Roger, out.
So you can see how the from and to bit works within here, you know, from 1 kilometer to Romeo 11 Alpha. So 0 comes back, starting at 1 kilometer, reads that bit of the message all the way to Romeo 11 Alpha, reads it back again. One of the questions on the chat, Alex has answered, which is about this whole if Whiskey 2-1 needed a repetition, then they'd wait until the end of the end of the conversation, and then they would start a new conversation. Hello 0, this is Whiskey 2-1. Say again, over. And that would ask for a repetition of the entire message. So just because Whiskey 2-1 isn't involved in that, just because 0 hasn't asked Whiskey 2-1 for a confirmation that they've received the message, doesn't mean they can't ask for the message to be repeated. Looking at a direction as an example.
Hello, Charlie 1-3 and Whiskey 2-1. This is 0. Move 1 kilometer east to support Romeo 11 Alpha. Charlie 1-3, acknowledge, over.
Charlie 1-3, say again, direction, over.
Zero east, over.
Charlie 1-3, Roger, out.
So you can see this is a really nice example of, you know, using something to specify what you need to, the repetition required. Say again, direction makes it really clear that all they need is the direction. So all 0 comes back with is that direction, east. So it keeps you keeping your transmissions really nice and short and helping, you know, avoid interception analysis. So you should now be able to explain how to correct a mistake in a transmission and ask for a repetition of a message. So these two bits are really commonly used bits of VP and can be a little bit tricky, but once you've got it, it's like a light bulb moment and you'll be fine. They do come up in the assessments, in the qualification assessments, and it's normally a case of it being a fill in the blanks. So you might have part of the transmission and you need to drag and drop the right words. So you'd have a selection of things like wrong, say again, east, west, north, and you've got to put the right bits into the right thing. So just remember the syntax of how they work, and the questions are easy. And as Alex has said, and we think I mentioned in the last few weeks, use the radios. When you do these examples, get your cadets to read them out over the radios, and then they're going to start getting used to it, getting used to pressing the pressel, how it sounds over the radio, all those kind of things. And you'll probably find that they'll get it wrong as well. And you can be like, well, use your VP, use your repetitions, your corrections to actually get it. Okay. So they're really practical. It's all about trying to keep this as hands-on as possible. And hopefully keeping your cadets really engaged. So get the kit out, get them using it. Don't just stand there in front of a projection and talk at them for hours on end, because it just doesn't engage them. And I know this is slightly hypocritical because I'm sat in front of a camera talking at you for what will in total be hours on end. Cool. So we will move on to the next lesson. If anyone's got any questions on that, then now's the time to ask. We shall move on. Just to clarify the thing that Alex has just said as well, you know, if back to this whole Whiskey 2-1 question, if it was really clear, like you key up straight away, then or you're the next transmission, then it's going to be clearly referencing the last message. If not, you would need some kind of reference in terms of repetition. So the same thing as referencing corrections, you might reference a repetition. The other thing to point out is that you'll notice that Ben and Alex are leaving time between each transmission, and we talked about that before, about leaving your 5-second gap between each transmission. So, and that's really important because there might be an urgent thing like a contact report that needs to come in, and it's important to remind your cadets of this even in the classroom environment, and it's because it starts to get them into that good habit. So with these examples, you should leave that kind of gap between each transmission and not just smash through them as quickly as you can. So let's look at the radio net and establishing comms, and this builds upon parts that we've already covered in the 1-star. So this is part of the progressive. We're getting to bigger radio nets where we need to sort of understand a little bit more about how to use it, improving our voice procedure, improving how we use it on the radios. So by the end of this lesson, you will be able to describe a simple radio net and draw the layout of a simple radio net, explain the 2 stations types, and establish communications with more than one station. Why do we do this? Because we're getting to bigger nets now, so we're going to start looking at net diagrams, and you need to know where you fit in within that net diagram. And also, at 1-star level, we did a radio check with one person, but actually, you might be doing radio checks with multiple sets of people, so you need to know where you fit in within that. So we'll look at the different types of stations. We'll look at a radio net, and there's a bit missing there because we'll look at responses. So there are 2 types of station: control stations, and a control station has the authority and responsibility for controlling communications, the flow of message traffic, and enforcing radio discipline. So the control station is 0. The control station is the person that has authority over that net in terms of comms, flow of message traffic, and radio discipline. They might not necessarily be the person who is in charge of, they might, if it was a company net level net, it wouldn't necessarily be, and it often isn't really, the company commander. So it's not the person who has authority for the members of the net, but who has authority and responsibility for the actual comms net itself. So the flow of communication, all those kind of things. They're the people who want to make sure that we are keeping our security, accuracy, and discipline, to avoid interception, analysis, deception, to avoid elements of coil being spread to the enemy, and to keep our messages clear, concise, and understood by everyone. And then you've got substations, and they're all the other stations on the net who are subordinate to and must obey orders from control, and they're known as substations. So we get a control station, and then we have substations. So a radio net, and you've probably heard me talking about the net quite a lot, is a number of radio stations grouped together on a common frequency for the sole purpose of communicating with each other. So there are a number of radio stations. They're all grouped together on the same frequency for the sole purpose of communicating with each other. And at this level, at 2-star level, we only look at a simple net. And you'll see simple nets are quite simple. So this is a net diagram of a simple net. And you can see that you've got the control station here, which is 0. And the spokes coming out are the different substations. We can see they're all on the same frequency on Foxtrot 1. And you can see the different call signs of all our substations. But you can see how they all come back to 0 because 0 is the one that has authority on them. And that is a simple net. So you might find the kind of question that might appear up on the assessment might be for you to draw that simple net. And in that case, you would be dragging the call signs into the different boxes. So you can clearly identify where 0 would go. They're going to go in the bottom, and our call sign's going to go at the top. And we write the call signs in alphanumeric order. So we talked about ordering of answering last week. It's the same thing we put on the net diagram. And that also means that the net diagram is part of one of the things you would give to all of your stations. So you don't have to, out in the field, work out your order of answering because it's already written down for you. So that is a simple radio net. And there are other types of net, and we cover them at a higher level. But at this level, you're only ever going to be on a simple net. It's going to be platoon level, so you've got your platoon commanders and you've got your sections, and that's about it. You might have a few supporting call signs as well. but it's all on one set of frequencies. There's one control station and multiple substations. Does anyone have any questions about that? Good. So establishing comms, we've talked about radio checks. And so we're looking back at 1 star. What was that pro word used to request a signal report? I've given it away. It's radio checks, yeah? And what are the 3 suitable responses to this request? Feel free to answer in the chat box. Who can type fastest? Yep, okay is one of them. Difficult's another, yep. And the last one, unworkable, yep. So okay, difficult and unworkable. Okay if the message, if you're hearing them loud and clear. Difficult if you can hear them, but you're really having to strain to hear. And unworkable if you can't make sense of it. But at 1 star, we only did it with 2 stations. If we need to have more than 2 stations, we need to follow the procedure. And that procedure is making sure we respond in the right way. So to avoid revealing all stations or delaying a radio net excessively, only a select number of stations are called. Other stations not involved should maintain a constant listening watch, transmitting only when necessary. You don't want to you want to avoid doing an all stations radio check, because if you did that, then the enemy now knows every single call sign on your net, which means they can start working out what kind of net you have. So the control station always will initiate the radio check and monitor all the responses. If a station misses their allocated order of answering, it must answer after the other stations. So if you miss your place in the queue, you go to the back of the queue. If control doesn't hear a response from a called substation, the pro word "nothing heard" is used. And we'll look at an example of this in a second. Where a substation does not receive a report of OK from control, they're to take action to improve their communications. So if they're difficult or unworkable, they need to do something about it. And what can they do? Well, they can move. Perhaps the location you're in is the signal's not getting through. Maybe you're the wrong side of a hill or something like that. They might be able to increase their transmission power. So you might be able to put more energy into the antenna. So there's more energy coming out. The signal could go further. Or maybe even change your antenna. So maybe you put a mast up, or you change the propagation of your antenna so it spreads in a different way. And that might mean that it gets further. And these kind of things, more detail of that is what you would cover in the intermediate and above. So in order to reduce transmission time, any stations not directly responded to by control are assumed to be OK. And we'll see this in a demo in a second. So in this example, we've got 0, Alpha 20, Charlie 22 Delta, Delta 10 Charlie, and Delta 11 Delta. Alex, you can stay at 0. Ben, if you go Alpha 20, I'll take Charlie 22 Delta. Sean, since you're on, do you want to take Delta 10 Charlie? And I'll take Delta 11 Delta as well, because I'm special.
Right.
Challenge for you, Sean.
Ooh.
Cool.
Which was mine again, Simon? Sorry, I was...
Alpha 20.
Hello, Charlie 1. This is 0. Radio check, over.
Alpha 20, OK, over.
Charlie 22 Delta, OK, over.
Delta 10 Charlie, OK, over.
Oh, yeah, that's me. Delta 11 Delta, OK, over. It's been a long day.
0, OK, out.
So you can see in this example, everyone's okay. Everyone's given a good response. Zero's heard everyone satisfactory as well. Because remember, this is two ways. So it's the substations are responding to say they could hear zero okay, and then zero is responding to say they could hear the substations okay. Because you can get comms that works one way and not the other. Maybe that zero's got a really nice antenna transmitting with loads of power, so all the substations can hear, but the substations on their smaller radios, the signal's not getting back to zero. So it can work. You do need to know what the quality of the transmission is both ways. So let's look at unsatisfactory comms. Ooh, you changed call signs on this one. Alex, you can be 0. Ben, if you're Charlie 20. Jacko, if you're Charlie 22 Bravo. I'll take Echo 12 Charlie. Ben, you can be Juliet 12 Delta as well.
Roger.
It's a challenge for you to have two.
Hello, Charlie 2. This is 0. Radio check. Over.
Charlie 20. Okay. Over.
Charlie 22 Bravo. Difficult. Over.
Echo 12 Charlie. Difficult. Over.
Juliet 12 Delta. Okay. Over.
Zero. Charlie 22 Bravo. Nothing heard. Echo 12 Charlie. Difficult. Out.
So you can see in this instance, we've got two call signs that were struggling to hear zero. And so they said difficult. And 0 couldn't hear Charlie 22 Bravo at all. So they used that pro word nothing heard. And they could hear Echo 12 Charlie, but it was difficult. So in this instance, Charlie 22 Bravo would need to go away and do something about it, move, increase power, change antennas, as would Echo 12 Charlie. And what you probably do is once you've sorted yourself out, you would then do just a call sign to call sign radio check with 0 to make sure that everything's sorted. So once you've moved or you've changed antenna or power, you do a radio check with them to make sure that that's actually fixed the problem. So let's look at defaulting stations. What happens if you miss the call? So Alex can stay as 0, Ben as Charlie 20, Jacko as Charlie 22 Bravo, me as Echo 12 Charlie, and Ben also as Juliet 12 Delta.
Hello, Charlie 2. This is 0. Radio check. Over.
Charlie 20. Difficult. Over.
Echo 12 Charlie. Okay. Over.
Juliet 12 Delta. Okay. Over.
Charlie 22 Bravo. Okay. Over.
0. Charlie 20. Unworkable. Out.
So you can see in this instance that everyone's all answered in order, but apart from Charlie 22 Bravo, who missed their spot. For whatever reason, they missed their place. So Echo 12 Charlie you might have heard that I waited quite a while because I waited the 5 seconds expecting Charlie 22 Bravo to respond. They didn't, so I gave it another breath and then I responded instead. Charlie 22 Bravo then goes to the back of the queue, so they wait until everyone else has responded and then they can come up for themselves. And just as an added bit of fun, Charlie 20 was could barely hear 0, and 0 couldn't hear Charlie 20 really well enough to work, so hence the unworkable. So Charlie 20 in this instance will need to go away and do something about it. So that's our examples done. So you should now be able to describe a simple radio net, draw the layout of the simple net, explain the two different station types, and establish communications with more than one station. So order of answering is the same as order of answering in multiple calls that we covered last week. And you know, that was just a bit of a revision in terms of defaulting stations and all that kind of thing as well. Does anyone have any questions about that? Brilliant. So that has covered all of the theory content. Oh, yeah, I can. That's all right. In terms of defaulting station, is that what you want to see? I'll assume it is. So you can see here, so you can see here that Charlie 22 Bravo didn't respond at all. They missed their turn. There's that gap. So then we carry on, and Charlie 22 Bravo comes in at the end. Once everyone else has come in their correct order, Charlie 22 Bravo comes in at the end. So if you're the control station, if you're 0, you need to keep a note of people that might not be responding to give them time to maybe come in at the end of the queue, because you don't know whether they've missed their space or whether they were transmitting and you just didn't hear them at all. So it's just about leaving those gaps so you don't transmit over each other. Cool. So that's all the course content in terms of learning that I can deliver over online. So the things that you're missing out on are, or that you've missed out on is the PRR and the 710. And those are the things that need to be delivered in person, along with probably a little bit of a refresher, but nothing major. Once those have been delivered to you, you can get the practical assessment, and then you can do the online assessment, and that will fully qualify you as basic CIS instructors, which means you can teach up to 2-star and assess up to 1-star. And that's going to be really advantageous for your cadets in your area, because it means that they can start going out with PRRs, start going out with 710s, and actually using the radios out in the field on exercise. And it's beneficial as well for your adults, because you could start teaching the adult radio user course again, so that they can utilize the radios whilst they're out delivering training. What I thought I'd just quickly look at, and you should get this. Oh, I hit the wrong button. You should get this lesson when just after all the practical stuff as well, just to give you a refresher, is what the online assessments look like. So I'm going to go through this fairly rapidly because I'm conscious of time, but this just to give you a really quick overview of the VLE, the Moodle at the moment, and how it looks and how you might complete them. Why are we doing this? Well, so you know what it looks like and it's not alien to you when you turn up. So we'll look at logging in, the different courses, what the assessments look like, the end of course, inval, and certificates as well. So the VLE at the moment is located at moodle.cadetsignals.org.uk. And what happens is students get registered onto it, usernames are made, and for the specific date, and they're assigned the correct course. So if you were to do a 2-star online assessment, they would be assigned the 2-star test. So you need to go to that web address and then log in. Your username is always your P number, both for cadets and adults, as it's recorded on Westminster. And your password will be given to you just before you need to log in. So the person running the course will have everyone's default passwords. You log in and you will find that you need to change your password straight away. So it looks a little bit like this. You'd go there, you would put your username in the username field, which would be your P number. So for me, it's 3005, yada, yada, yada. And then I'll put my password. Then you put the password that you've just been given in. Straight away, when you first log in, you'll have to change your password, and your password must have both capitals and lower cases, and at least one number. If you've previously done an assessment on there, your password will be whatever you set it to last time. So it is important to actually remember those passwords. They can be reset, but they're a bit of a faff to do. So here's an example. They've logged in with the default password. And so straight away, they're asked to change it. Once it's been changed, you actually get into the system properly. and you'll see any of the courses that are assigned to you. So in this instance, they've been assigned a couple of different courses. So you want to find the one that you're assigned, be it basic signals instructor, or if it was a cadet, you know, it might be 1-star, 2-star. It's potential that you've delivered basic 1-star, 2-star in a, what I like to call a 0 to hero course of all of them in one hit over a long weekend. In which case they'll all be there, and they have to do them one at a time, basic followed by 1, followed by 2. Does anyone have any questions on what that looks like? So you would have already been enrolled on those relevant courses, and within each course there might be some or all of the following. So practice quizzes, and these exist not to revise you on the course content, but to give you a chance to get used to how Moodle works. Moodle is mobile phone and tablet responsive, so you could be on a laptop, a tablet, or mobile phone, and the way you interact is slightly different on a touchscreen versus a mouse. And so these practice quizzes give you a chance to get used to that before you're actually doing the assessment proper. The course assessment, followed by a course evaluation, and then the course certificate. So you can see here the useful practice quizzes are at the top, and they exist on pretty much all of the courses. So they're useful if you've never used Moodle before. And then you'll see underneath the course assessment here, and you'll see it's not ticked because it hasn't been done yet. The assessments have a restriction in the time or the number of attempts allowed. This goes back to if you or in the future, if you're running these courses and you've got students who maybe require extra time, then make sure you note that when you sign them up with the cadet signals training team, and they will allocate that extra time. So they do put it on. And they're notified to you before you start it, so you know what your time limit is before you start the assessment. Once it's been started, it counts as an attempt, even if you don't answer any questions, and the timer starts straight away. So here's an example of one of the assessments. It says attempt allowed 2, and the time limit is 45 minutes. You hit that button that says attempt quiz now, and that's you starting the assessment. And it even gives you a little warning that, you know, do you actually want to start? Hopefully that gives you a little bit of a view. The assessments are all randomly generated for each student, so everyone gets a slightly different order of questions, or from a big pool of questions that are written, they'll select a certain number out of them. And it's regenerated for each student on every attempt, which means it's really hard for students to copy or have an answer book already made of the specific answers to the specific questions. You can navigate through page by page, using the navigation box. Basically, you answer the question on the page, you can hit next page, or you can jump around between loads of them. Why you do that, I don't know. You can flag your questions to be returned to you later on in the assessment. So if you're not sure, you can flag it, and then at the end you can go and look at all those flagged questions and hopefully answer them. You've got the remaining time, which is counting down on the screen, and it's worth noting things like questions that ask for mnemonics, say, you know, ACF, and in reality, for our reality, it'll be things like SAD, SAD, or COIL, or things like that, will accept either you writing it out in full, including the first letter of that mnemonic, so like its ACF would be written as Army Cadet Force, or missing out the A, the C, and the F, that both of which will be accepted. So here's what it kind of would look like. Here's an example of them. You've got the questions. These ones, you would click the box and you would type the answer. And then as you scroll down, and you can see how it says next page here. You can see here that some of the questions have been flagged. That's what the little red thing by the question is. And it's all fairly self-explanatory. Once you're happy, you click finish attempt. You can see a summary of all your questions. And then once you're happy, you've answered all of them, you can hit submit all and finish. And that ends the assessment. So you can see here, you can see that they've all been answer saved. You can then submit all and finish. And that will submit it. You get immediately, you get feedback of all the questions, similar to how you've probably been finding them here on the online learning stuff with immediate, you know whether you've got it right or wrong. You can use the navigation pane to view any of the questions that are highlighted in red or yellow. Red means you've got it completely wrong. Yellow might be if it was a multiple choice answer and you needed to select 3, you only got 2 of them right and 1 of them wrong. So that's what it might look like at the end. You can see the ones in red were answered incorrectly, and then the ones in yellow here were partially incorrect. Or partially correct, depends if you're a glass half full or a glass half empty person. If you've not read the standard required, you can reattempt. Before you do that, ask your instructor to review your assessment with you. Go through the questions. What did you get wrong? You know, that little bit of teaching to correct any mistakes. And then you'll be allowed a second attempt at the relevant assessment. Because of that, you can't reattempt straight away. There's normally I think it's a 20-minute minimum time between reattempts to give you that chance to go through your incorrect questions with your instructor and talk about where that was wrong. Okay, after that, there's an opportunity to do feedback, which is interesting and is important because we do actually look at it. And then after that, you have to click a certificate and they're available to you once you've done all the assessments, you've given the feedback, so you need to submit feedback. Then you can view your certificate, and you need to view your certificate to check for any errors, because it's the certificate, it's the information on the certificate which the national team use to upload your qualifications into Westminster. So if it's wrong on the certificate, they might not upload your qualification, so you need to be able to flag it, that way they can. Yeah, correct, Richard. So this bit, the Moodle bit, won't you won't be signed up to it until you've done the practical stuff. So this is just to give you a bit of an overview of what it's going to look like eventually. You know, so just to give you a bit of an overview. Justine, 50%, if you look at almost all of the cadet syllabus, not just within CIS, 50% is often the pass mark that's required to pass off a set of questions. And the CIS questions are quite thorough. And it, you know, yes, 50% is a scrape. You really do want to be hoping that your cadets are getting 70 plus really to get through. And as Alex has pointed out, CFAVs, most of them are 75% pass marks, unless you've got something that's safety critical. Safety critical stuff for things you're going to cover in the practical stuff when you do the practical with radios is talking about minimum safety distances from antennas and stuff like that. So here lies the formal part of the delivery of all of the training. We've delivered all of the theory stuff now. What I'm going to do is I'll obviously hang around here for a little bit to answer any questions that anyone's got from tonight. Next week, same time, same place. I will dedicate from 7 till 8 as a bit of time. I'll be online here. We'll have a hangouts like this. If you've got any questions that have come up, then please let me know. You'll get some assessments that come up for like every other week from today's lessons. Also, I'll put up at some point in the next week or so some feedback, and your feedback would be really appreciated. It's the first time we've ever done this. Hopefully people have enjoyed it and engaged with it, but I'm definitely keen to hear back the good points and the not so good points. And as you've hopefully already seen, both myself and the National CIS training team are really responsive to feedback and improving the course. So if there are things that you've pointed out that we could do better, we will, and we'll implement it in the future. Everyone who's filled in the registration, and once you've done all of the assessments, I will submit to your local brigade CIS advisors your name as having completed all of the theory part of the training and therefore only needing the practical. If you get any problems in the future or anything, just direct people towards myself or the National CIS training team, and we can help support you. But basically, you don't need a huge amount of training now to finish off your basic CIS instructor course and get that qualification and start teaching your cadets and your adults. So that's me. If anyone's got any questions, I'm here for you.
Yeah, Simon, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Regarding the zeros issue,
yes.
PowerPoint, when you if you were to use for the text and messages only, if you use the font Consolas, then the zeros flash properly as actual zeros.
Okay, that's good. That is very good to know. In all the assessments and stuff, obviously, because it's text based, you can just input 0 as a normal 0 without a slash in, and it comes up. But that's a really good note in terms of if you're writing stuff to give handouts to cadets and things. It's really good to do it. A long time ago, I used to print them out and then manually put a slash through all of them with a pen, which took ages.
Yeah, no, Consolas is like a technical font, so it looks like messages anyway. It's not
that's good.
It's not too far from Calibri or anything like that either. So
I think that's really good.
Two fonts in Windows, the slash to 0.
Yeah. Oh, great.
Magic.
Brilliant.
Simon, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
I've just got a little bit lost with regarding, you're saying that we can't do the practicals at the moment, but you're saying that the assessments that you're talking about on the CSVLE, we can't do those assessments until we've done the practicals. Is that right?
So just to confirm, the stuff that I'm assigning you in Google Classroom every week, on reality, the end of lesson questions. So I can't do the end of lesson questions to 120 people over here. And so my only way of making sure that everyone is engaging in the lessons and that I'm teaching it correctly is to give you those end of lesson questions through the Google Classroom. So those things you're doing are confirming to me that you've come and you've answered and you've understood the content of the lesson, and therefore gives me the ability to put a tick in the box to say you've got the theory teaching. Once you've had the practical teaching, which will only happen once we go back to face-to-face, you will end up having the qualification assessment. And that's the one that happens on the CSVLE, what happens on the Moodle. And that's the one that if you pass that, you get the qualification of being a basic CIS instructor.
Right, so we're doing nothing at the moment until we've gone back and done the practicals. And once we go back, will you automatically enroll us in doing that? Or?
Yeah, absolutely. So for you specifically, because you're in my area, it will actually be physically me that does it. But for example, if you were in Scotland, it will be either your county's CIS officer or your brigade CIS advisor will be the one that organises the practical training, and at the same time will organise signing you up to have that assessment. So in your example, I will let you know when the practical ones are on, and as part of that, I will enrol you online, and we'll sort all that out in person.
Okay.
Basically.
Great. Okay. Thank you.
Cool. Right, I'm going to call it a day then, unless there's anyone else who's got any more pressing questions. I'm going to stop the record.